Today, we are diving into the incredible, timeless, and just deeply practical wisdom of the Buddhist master Ajahn Chah. His instructions on how to train your mind are honestly as relevant right now as they ever were. They really offer a clear path out of our own confusion.
So let's just jump right in with a pretty direct question for you. Is your mind running your life, or are you running your mind? It seems like a simple question, right? But Ajahn Chah taught that the answer to this question is the key to, well, pretty much everything.
You know, Ajahn Chah had this brilliant way with analogies. He famously said that the untrained mind is like a water buffalo. It's powerful for sure, but it's also stubborn, and it's totally liable to just wander off into the mud if you don't keep a firm hand on it. Does that sound even a little bit familiar?
So, before we can even begin to talk about how to train the mind, we first have to get a really clear look at what we're working with. And that brings us to our first section, really diagnosing the problem of the untrained mind. Okay, so here's the core issue in a nutshell. Our minds, they're basically wired to chase whatever feels good and run away from whatever feels bad. And it's this constant push and pull, this relentless cycle of seeking the next little hit of pleasure and avoiding discomfort. That's what Ajahn Chah pointed to as the engine of our own dissatisfaction and anxiety. Now this is where it gets really, really interesting. This quote reframes the whole idea of what suffering even is. Ajahn Chah taught that our struggle comes from clinging on to things, identities, feelings, situations that are, just by their very nature, not permanent. They're unreliable. So the freedom, the Buddha as he calls it, isn't hiding somewhere else. It's found by actually seeing and accepting this fundamental truth about everything.
All right, so if our natural mental habit, our stream, is leading us into trouble, what's the solution? Well, let's move on and see how this builds. The method is all about practicing against the stream.
Ajahn Chah boiled down the practical start of this training to 3 simple, though let's be real, challenging actions. Eat little, sleep little, and talk little. Now, this isn't about punishing yourself, not at all. The whole point here is that these actions help reduce our sensual indulgences and all those external distractions. It creates the space and the quiet needed to finally observe what's actually going on in our own minds.
And this just perfectly illustrates the core challenge. He was very clear about this. This work is hard. It's difficult because you're consciously choosing to row against this incredibly powerful current of your lifelong habits and conditioning. We just want to go with the flow of our moods, but the real work, the real freedom, lies in opposing it.
He had another great analogy for this. He compared the process to taming a hungry monkey. The monkey is our craving mind, always jumping around, looking for its food, whether that's notifications on your phone, the next thing in your shopping cart, or just endless mental drama. The practice is to patiently stop feeding it. And at first, that monkey screams and fights. But if you hold firm, eventually it gets tired. It grows still, and it learns it doesn't actually need all that external food to be okay.
Okay, let's get into this next part because it's probably the most radical shift in perspective that he taught. It's all about learning to turn our biggest obstacles into our greatest teachers.
So here's the crucial point, this complete reframing. Those difficult mental states that we all have, anger, desire, doubt, restlessness, we're usually taught to see them as enemies, things to be stamped out and destroyed. But Ajahn Chah's instruction was the total opposite. Welcome them. They are your teachers. They're showing up to test your wisdom and to show you exactly where you're still stuck.
Let's make this really concrete. Let's take sensual desire. The ordinary, untrained view is, oh, this is a pleasure, I should follow it. But the practitioner, through really careful observation, starts to see it differently. They see it's more like a fire. It promises warmth, but if you try to grasp it, it only burns you and leaves you wanting more. Seeing that difference clearly, that is wisdom. And this all leads to this incredibly profound insight, captured perfectly in this quote. It's through seeing suffering that you become wise. Real wisdom isn't found by escaping all your problems. No, it's forged by looking directly at our struggles, understanding what they're made of, and learning the lessons they have to teach us.
So, we've diagnosed the problem, and we've looked at the method of training. Let's move to our final section and see how this all comes together, allowing us to see the world and our own lives with some genuine clarity.
The goal of all this practice isn't some far-off, mystical, unobtainable state. It's actually the development of what's called right view. And that's just a fancy way of saying the wisdom to see things as they truly are. They come and they go, they're impermanent, and they're not worth clinging to. When you start to see the world this way, you can live with this deep sense of peace, no matter what's happening on the outside.
So how do we actually apply this in our day-to-day lives? Ajahn Chah gave some incredibly clear guidance. First, whatever you do, just look at your intention. Before you act, pause for a second and ask yourself why you're really doing it. Second, learn moderation. This is huge. It's about learning to recognize when enough is actually enough, instead of always chasing more. Third, know the difference between convention, the stories we tell ourselves about things, and the actual reality of the situation. Fourth, understand that good actions are their own reward. Don't go looking for a pat on the back. And finally, be so careful with your speech. Words have incredible power, so use them wisely. These aren't just rules, they are powerful tools for living with clarity.
And this brings us to one of his most powerful teachings. He said, as your body begins to run down and wear out with age, don't resist that. But also, don't let your mind deteriorate along with it. Keep the mind separate. Wow. I mean, this is the ultimate freedom he pointed to, a mind that is not bound by the fate of the physical body.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to really reflect on, a question that gets right to the very heart of Ajahn Chah's teachings. If you died today, right now, what would you have to let go of? The answer to that? It reveals everything. Thanks for joining us.